Hi, I'm Michael Montero for Boxing Monthly, and you're watching the Neutral Corner for the week of December 5th. All right, so I went the whole year without getting sick, and then it finally hit me right on Thanksgiving. Pow, right in the kisser. I got really sick. I spent the entire weekend laying on my couch being miserable, watching boxing. Some of it great, some of it not so great. We'll talk about that in a minute. I got my hot tea here. But look, new issue of Boxing Monthly's out. You guys, if you haven't gotten it in stores yet, if you don't live in a country where it's available in stores, you guys know, as I always say, it's available online. Go to the website. You see it right here. You can get the app on iTunes and download it there. So check out the new issue of Boxing Monthly. Really cool feature on Chris Eubank Jr. And just a prediction, I'm guessing next month's issue is going to have an Irish traveler on the cover. Just a guess. Just a guess. Let's get into the ring walk. This week's question is from my man, Rob Palmer, and it reads, is there anyone that deserves Trainer of the Year more than Peter Fury? Combine both the strategy that was implemented to end Klitschko's 10-year undefeated streak with the development of Tyson Fury as a fighter over the past 3 to 4 years. That's an interesting question. And there's going to be people out there that probably would say yes. I'm going to say no. All right, now look, let's backpedal a little bit here. Tyson Fury, Peter Fury, the whole Fury camp, they absolutely have the upset of the year with his win over Wladimir Klitschko. And I'll talk more about that, obviously, later in the episode. But I try not to put too much stock into one performance, into one fight. And I tend to rate trainers and fighters themselves over a greater body of work, okay? Look, there were people saying that Teddy Atlas is the Trainer of the Year for Timothy Bradley's performance against Brandon Rios a few weeks back. Because all of a sudden Timothy Bradley, was knocking out a guy in Brandon Rios who doesn't get knocked out. But if you look at Fury, look, it was kind of a perfect storm and a perfect set of circumstances, right place, right time against Wladimir Klitschko, and he put it all together in one good performance. That was enough to get it done against Klitschko on that night. But Fury fought only one other time this year against Christian Hammer, I believe. I want to say it was in the first quarter of the year. And officially he weighed, I think, 260 pounds for that fight. Officially he weighed 247 pounds against Klitschko. Now I know Fury is saying that the scale was off and he was really heavier. Fury says a lot of crazy stuff. I tend not to really buy most of what comes out of his mouth. He's a character and he talks a lot. But officially, he was 13 pounds heavier for a fight earlier this year. There was a fight last year, I want to say he was north of 270. So this is a guy who isn't really the most disciplined fighter, and I put a lot of that on the trainer. I've been very critical of other trainers like Robert Garcia for his fighters not making weight, for them having issues with weight. So this year there really isn't a clear-cut favorite for Trainer of the Year that sticks out in my mind. But look at what Reynoso, what they've done with Canelo Alvarez. I mean, Canelo has the KO of the year against James Kirkland, right? And then he fought Miguel Cotto, I thought, very well from a tactical standpoint. You look at rounds, I scored at 8-4, possibly 9-3 for Canelo. Canelo beat Cotto better than Floyd Mayweather did a few years ago. And Floyd Mayweather broke his nose in that fight against Cotto. And Cotto dominated a few rounds of that fight. Against Alvarez, Cotto didn't dominate any rounds. All the rounds were close and competitive. Canelo closed the show very strong. So, you could maybe say the Reynosos might deserve a nod. Freddie Roach is always a top candidate. I mean, Cotto fought well. He actually looked kind of light in his toes and fought pretty well against Alvarez a week or so ago. And then Victor Postal won a title, a minor upset of Lucas Matisse. You look at Roman Gonzalez's trainer. I can't think of the name right now, but Romo Gonzalez was 3-0 this year with 3 knockouts, and one of those was against Brian Viloria, who's a world-class fighter. Abel Sanchez, what he's done with Triple G. I mean, Triple G, 3-0 with 3 knockouts. Not against the murderer's row of opposition, but the consistency. You look at what John David Jackson has done with Sergey Kovalev. He's looked unbeatable, and he's improved fighters like Chris Algieri, who looked a lot better in his last fight, and some of the other guys he's taken on. So I understand where you're going with the Peter Fury thing. Good performance by Tyson Fury, and he's kind of had a collection of trainers working with him. He kind of grew up in that whole boxing scene with the Irish Travelers and the way that they fight. But I always thought Tyson Fury could box, and I've been saying it for a while. You guys who follow me, I've been saying that he has underrated boxing ability. The problem with him was discipline and focus, and that knockdown. When Steve Cunningham put him down a few fights back, it seems that he's cleaned up his act since then and fought a lot more intelligently. In this fight, he looked in shape. I don't care what he says about the scale. This is the lightest I've seen Tyson Fury look in a long time. But yeah, can't go with Peter Fury Trainer of the Year, my friend. All right, so real quickly, let's talk about some of the boxing action or lack thereof that I watched while I was sick as hell this week. On Wednesday on ESPN from Florida, Erislandy Lara scored a 3rd-round TKO over Jan Zevek, who looked like an absolutely shot fighter. Shouldn't fight anymore, should hang him up. It was a weird kind of knockout where his shoulder hurt and he reached out to touch gloves and Lara hit him, and it was weird. Can't really knock Lara for the performance, but I can knock Al Heyman for the matchmaking and ESPN for approving this shit. Well, actually, they didn't have to approve it because it's a time buy, because it's PBC. The most entertaining part of that was Teddy Atlas, with his wacky zaniness in the commentating. He ate a giant turkey leg. It was fun. But that's all I need to say about that. Saturday afternoon from Texas, Errol Spence, Jermall Charlo, and Erickson Lubin scored knockouts, dominant victories over pizza boys or cab drivers. Who gives a shit? That was pretty useless as well. Some of the commentating was kind of funny. Sugar Ray Leonard, man, great man. Love the guy. He one of my favorite fighters ever, one of my favorite personalities ever in all of sports. But his commentating puts me to sleep. But he got caught cussing in the middle of this card. That was, to me, like the highlight of it. But again, I was, half passed out on my couch, high on cough syrup instead of watching this. But nothing really great there. We skip to the Showtime card. Adrian Granados scores a TKO in the 8th round over Amir Imam. Amir Imam was one of the highly touted prospects in all of boxing, right? Undefeated. Really the only guy that Don King has that matters. And Imam put down Adrian in the 1st round. And, Adrian recovered and systematically took the fight to Imam and wore him down. Imam looked kind of gassed in the 6th, 7th, 8th round. And the kid just kept coming. And I want to say Granados has has like 4 losses, right? His record isn't sparkly and shiny, but he's been battle tested. He's a tough kid, and he came to win. And for Imam, this was a tough loss for a prospect, because it's one thing to just get caught with a shot or something like that, but he was systematically just outworked and mentally, willfully beat, emotionally beat. So it's going to be an emotional game for him getting back. He can work on the stamina. He could be in better shape for his next fight. I've been saying all along, he's really tall for 140. And I think eventually he's going to go up to 47. Don't be surprised if that's what he does after this first loss. But, maybe that's what it was. Maybe he needs to move up in weight and have a little more energy. Maybe that's all it is. But there's going to come a point in the next fight, the fight after that, whatever, where he's going to be emotionally and mentally questioned and challenged again. It's going to be interesting to see how he responds to that. It's just a loss. It's not a big deal. Fighters lose. Let's see how he rebounds from this. He's got all the skills, right? If he can mentally get right and improve and just show that this made him better, then this loss is a blessing in disguise. But great to see this upset win. And it's one of the things I love about boxing. And it's interesting, you know, I got into a MMA versus boxing thing on Twitter earlier this week. And somebody just flat out asked me, what is the one thing you like better about boxing over MMA? And to me, it's the fact that a guy can get knocked down, you get those 10 seconds. You know you have the rest of the minute to survive. It's a short 3-minute round versus MMA, you have 5-minute rounds. So if you can hold, if you can move, you can do what you gotta do to survive the round, you get 60 more seconds to get your wits back, right? But you're given that opportunity. In MMA, you can just get lucky. And you see those guys, you know, sometimes they throw punches from way crazy angles, right? Or strikes, you know, they call them strikes. You land a lucky strike, you knock a guy down. You can just tackle him and sit on his face and do this until the ref stops it. And to me, it's so anticlimactic. And you're robbed of what we saw with this upset of Amir Imam. You're robbed of Francisco Vargas, fight of the year, you know, coming back and beating Takashi Miura a week or so ago. So to me, yeah, that's just one of the things about boxing that I love. But anyway, also on that card, Wladimir Alvarez scored a majority decision over Isaac Chilemba. Scores of 118-110, 115-113, and one judge had it a draw. He's now the WBC mandatory for Adonis Stevenson. Look, if you're fighting to a majority draw, or majority decision, I'm sorry, not a majority draw, majority decision win against Isaac Chilemba, no disrespect to him, but he's not an elite level light heavy. For Alvarez, you know, and he got a little home cooking. Some people thought that this fight could have went either way. It's in Canada where Alvarez has been fighting and kind of building up a profile. I don't see where there's going to be a real big challenge for Adonis Stevenson. But look, Al Haymon, he's had Alvarez fight on a couple of Adonis Stevenson undercards. He's been building up that profile there. And obviously he wanted to match these guys. I think some of the PBC plan is starting to come together here. And I think Al Haymon was just putting these guys on cards together or close together and not having them fight. Now it seems they're finally starting to fight, like Danny Jacobs and Peter Quillin, right? Those guys have been fighting on separate cards all year or, you know, on co-features, whatever. Finally, they're gonna fight. Well, Alvarez and Stevenson, nobody is really clamoring for that, but it's a fight that actually makes sense. It's better than Stevenson's last 2 or 3 fights. Hopefully the winner of that fight, which will be Stevenson, fights Andres Fonfara, who's done more than enough to deserve another chance at Stevenson. Like maybe next year, that's like the next phase in the PBC plan, hopefully, is some of these matches start happening. Some of these guys that have been fighting, another one is Dominic Breazeale, Charles Martin, which I'll talk about later. You know, those guys have been fighting on PBC cards. They should have been fighting each other. Now they are. So maybe the PBC, that's the second phase of the plan that we're going to start seeing. I'm hoping. I'm knocking on IKEA wood. In the main event, don't mind me, guys. I'm really doped up on medication right now. In the main event, James DeGale scores a unanimous decision over Lucian Bute, defends his super middleweight title, scores of 116-112, 117-111 twice. And look, Lucian Bute, you know, he looked better in this fight than he's looked in a while. James DeGale looked really great in spots, and then in some spots he looked bored. I don't know, like he just took chunks of rounds off. I don't know. I don't know if it's a stamina thing with him or if it's like a mental stamina thing with him. Physically, he looked fine. But it just seems to be there was chunks of rounds, if not entire rounds, he just kind of took off and let Bute get back into the fight. And I thought it was a lot closer than those scores indicated, actually. I thought Bute fought very, very well. For DeGale, you know, I'm hoping we get to see a unification match with Badou Jack. Again, that would be another one of those PBC things where it's like, if that's phase 2 of the plan, that fight needs to happen next year, and it needs to happen over there where we do a much better business, on the other side of the pond. But, based on what I've seen, I don't know who to pick in that fight, but I'm leaning towards Badou Jack at this point. James DeGale, he does a lot of things great, but he just doesn't do it consistently. He switches a lot, orthodox and southpaw, but he doesn't really plant himself in either stance and make a statement. He kind of plays around here, then plays around here, then takes a minute off. And I don't know, man. Maybe he was just having fun. I don't know, but I'd like to see him just, plant his ass into some shots and go for the kill and really try to make a statement in a fight. I feel like he does just enough, but can we talk about his sister? What was her name, man? I don't know. I forgot her name, but he's got a very good-looking sister. I'm a fan. He needs to bring her up in the ring next time as part of the corner entourage. We need to get a better view. But from what I saw, don't tell Tiffany. I'm a fan. And then there was the fight in Germany, or the sparring session, whichever you prefer. Tyson Fury, the Irish Traveler, the undefeated, brash, trash-talking Brit, scores the upset of the year against long-reigning heavyweight champion Wladimir Klitschko, who had gone undefeated for, I believe, over 11 years, and just cleaned out the entire heavyweight division that would have him. Okay, so where do I start with this one? First of all, the scores. Fury won 116-111. One judge had it, and two judges had it 115-112. Now, that includes a point deduction that Fury got for rabbit punching, which I thought was justified. Tony Weeks had warned him enough times. It was late in the fight, didn't affect anything. I thought the point deduction was fine. But, looking at those scores, that's 8-4, 9-3. That's decisive. This was a clear-cut, decisive victory for Tyson Fury. However, I wouldn't call it a domination. I wouldn't call it a masterclass. Some of the rhetoric I've seen on Twitter and everything like that, I would call it a horrible performance by Wladimir Klitschko. And a fight where Tyson Fury essentially neutralized what Wladimir Klitschko does and did just enough of his own work to win the majority of the rounds. That's what happened. Wladimir Klitschko landed 53 punches. I can't read my own handwriting. 53 punches, I believe. Okay? I disked Jermall Charlo with his fight where he landed, I want to say it was 72 punches. Don't quote me, but I believe 72 punches in 10 rounds. Wladimir Klitschko lands 53 punches over 12 rounds. For those of you comparing the two fights, they don't compare because Wladimir Klitschko lost this fight, okay? And he was fighting a very young, tough challenger, top-rated challenger who had proven himself as a top contender. Jermall Charlo was fighting a guy tailor-made for him to look good in a showcase fight and should have stopped the guy. So these two fights don't compare, okay? But I bring up Klitschko's punch output because as horrible as that was, and as much as he should be ridiculed for that, he should. It's a horrible performance. Tyson Fury only landed 86 punches, okay? He landed literally not even 3 more punches around, almost 3 more punches around than Klitschko landed. So it's not as if Fury completely dominated and decimated Wladimir. What Fury did, and this is what was the most surprising part to me, is his corner came in with a vastly superior game plan than Klitschko's. Jonathan Banks got exposed a little bit as a trainer in this fight. I don't know who the hell Klitschko sparred. I've heard that he was sparring Vitaly, which is the worst thing he could have done to prepare for this fight. Vitaly Klitschko hasn't fought in years. It's his brother, and he fought nothing like the way Tyson Fury fights. And Tyson Fury kind of fights a little wacky. It's kind of hard to mimic, but they should have got a very tall guy with very long arms and prepared for the distance. It just seemed that the distance and the spacing bothered Wladimir, and he flat out looked confused to me. And that was the most surprising part. And then on the inside in the clinches, and the guys at HBO, who I thought had a pretty bad night commentating this fight. I'll talk more about that in a second. But the one thing they did get right was they were talking about how in the clinches, Wladimir wasn't going to the body. Wladimir wasn't hitting in the clinches. It was Fury working in the clinches. Even the clinches that Fury initiated. A couple times late in the fight, he got tagged and got a little shook from some of the shots. They got his attention. And he grabbed Wladimir, and he worked in the clinches. He pushed off when he needed to. He moved Vlad around, which you'd expect, he's the bigger guy. But it looked like Wladimir literally went to camp and prepared the way he has prepared for his last 10 fights. There was no specific game plan for Tyson Fury. And it was obvious, painfully obvious, that Klitschko took Fury very, very lightly and didn't expect him to fight as well as he did. Fury's feinting, you know, it looked almost comical in the early rounds because it was so over-exaggerated. But he doesn't care if it looks comical. He doesn't care if people think he looks goofy. He cares about winning. And he was, doing this crazy, herky-jerky. He looked like a weirdo at times. But Wladimir couldn't figure out the distance. And you saw Vlad's shoulder kind of twitching. He wanted to shoot the right hand, but he just wouldn't. Even the jab, which is his weapon to set everything up. It's basically the building blocks for Klitschko's house, if you want to think of it that way. It's the foundation to his house, is that jab. And Fury, with all his feinting, took away Klitschko's jab, so without that foundation, he couldn't build his house. And after 6-7 rounds, I think I had given Klitschko 1 or 2 rounds after like the 7th or 8th round. I'm like, damn, man, this is like 6-2. Jonathan Banks has to light a fire under Wladimir's ass. And he kept saying, look, you got to get low and make this a fight. Well, look, Jonathan, you got to know your fighter. Wladimir and even his brother Vitaly, they weren't brawlers. Never were gonna be, right? Even Vitaly against Lennox Lewis, when he needed to brawl, he didn't brawl. He stayed technical and ended up losing the fight because the doctor stopped it when he needed to go in there and go for broke and end it. But Wladimir is even less of that fighter mentality than Vitaly ever was. You can't just give that kind of instruction to Wladimir and think he's gonna go out there. You have to give specific technical instructions to this guy. I never heard Banks say, shoot to the body in the clinch, throw an uppercut. He's wide. Tyson Fury is wide open for an uppercut. Deontay Wilder would nail him with an uppercut if Fury didn't knock Wilder out first. We'll talk about that another time. But Fury's wide open for an uppercut on the inside. He lunges when he does get close. He's wide open for what I call a 45, which, isn't a full hook. It's not an uppercut. You come in at a 45. I saw absolutely no feinting from Klitschko with the right hand. Fury was looking for the right hand all night and neutralized. He kept leaning back. Feint with the right hand and come with a left hook. Feint with the right hand, pivot, and come with even if it's to the body, something. There was no technical instruction from Banks. And even when he was trying to get Vlad to just go for broke, like in the 12th round, and Vlad kind of did, could you imagine Emmanuel Stewart, if he was in that corner? What he would have been saying? He would have been screaming and cussing Wladimir out. We've seen him do it in other fights, right? So I just think it was like just a total collapse on the entire Klitschko team, including the champion himself. And for Tyson Fury, now he's the champion, but there's an asterisk because there's a rematch clause. And Wladimir Klitschko made it clear that he wants to go forward with that rematch. And as I understand it, there's no tune-up fight or anything like that. It's an immediate rematch. So I expect it's going to happen in March or April of next year. I also expect it'll be back in Germany. There's an outside chance maybe they can negotiate something, toss some money around and get it over into London, O2, where it could do huge numbers, right? As far as they could easily get 80,000 people to come out to that, easily. But I still think it's probably gonna end up in Germany. What's gonna be interesting to me is how does Tyson Fury show up in the rematch, okay? We'll talk about Wladimir in a second, but for Tyson Fury, I mentioned his weights. He's been up and down the scale, and I don't care what he says. This is the most in shape he's looked in years. Is he gonna stay in shape over the next 6 months and come into the ring next April, it probably won't be till April, in the same shape with the same mental focus? If he does, I think he wins the rematch, because I didn't see anything out of Wladimir that looked like the guy we've seen tear up this division and dominate fighters who, quite frankly, were better than Tyson Fury, okay? He looked like he couldn't get his shots off, and every time you hear a fighter say, I just couldn't get my shots off, I just couldn't get my punches off, that's the first sign that they're done as a fighter. Now, there's been a lot of things going on for Wladimir outside the ring. There's, everyone's, of course, knows that he's become a father recently. Hasn't quite looked the same since having that baby. He's had 2 fights, one against Jennings and now one against Fury, and just kind of didn't look like the same guy. Sometimes those outside the ring distractions and, having a family can mentally kind of change a guy. I'm not saying it physically changes him. I'm saying mentally he doesn't have the same hunger as a fighter. Possibly. Just putting this out there hypothetically, okay? His girlfriend, Hayden Panettiere, she went into rehab for depression. There's issues in the relationship there. Did any of this stuff play a factor with Vlad's mentality? I don't know, but I'm telling you, when I watched that fight, I saw a guy who just mentally did not want to be there at times. Now, maybe it was frustration because he knew he was losing and quite frankly being embarrassed and putting on a bad performance. But maybe it was just, a guy who was 12, 13 years older, simply not wanting it as much as the young man with all that vibrance and energy. And I don't know, but we're gonna get answers to these questions in the rematch. And even though this fight was so bad, I haven't even watched it a second time, everyone's gonna wanna see the rematch because look, this was a historic fight. It was a changing of the guard, right? And the whole boxing scene has been shook up over it. If the rematch reverses this, then we kind of go back to where we were. But if Fury can win again, it's a whole new era in the heavyweight division. I'll say this about Klitschko. If he can come back, if he can learn from this, if he can watch the tape or whatever and actually put together a training camp that makes sense and come back at 40 years old and defeat Tyson Fury in the rematch next year, I think it goes a long way to further solidifying his status as an all-time great. I still consider him an all-time great heavyweight champion. Look, guys, fighters lose, champions lose, all-time great champions lose. And if you look at the way it's generally done in boxing, going all the way back, there's a passing of the torch, and it's usually done via a loss. Floyd Mayweather wouldn't be who he is if it weren't for Oscar De La Hoya passing that torch, right? But sticking with the heavyweight division, Lennox Lewis is an anomaly. Usually there's that passing of the torch. And I don't think we're seeing the Tyson Fury era, that's just my feeling. I feel that should he win the rematch, and I think if he stays in shape and keeps his focus, I think he will win the rematch. I don't think we're seeing the beginning of the Tyson Fury era. I think he'll have a brief reign, and I think that the heavyweight title is going to get whacked up all over the place because that's kind of what happens, right? But it doesn't change the fact that Wladimir Klitschko owned this division for a decade. Even when his brother came back, his brother was the #1 contender, but he wasn't the champion. Wladimir Klitschko was the champion. And he might dropped down a notch or two on my all-time great list. He might be like number 12 now instead of number 9 or 10. But, you know, even if he comes back and loses to Fury, it doesn't change that for me. He's still an all-time great heavyweight. But sticking with Fury, if he wins this rematch, I think what happens, unfortunately, is what generally happens after a dominant heavyweight champion is dethroned. The division blows up. I think titles are going to get stripped. I think boxing politics will have its way. I think that Al Heyman's going to reach out and grab what he can, and all these other promoters, they're going to paw and scratch, and they're going to grab what they can. And you could wind up in the next 2 years with 3 or 4 different titleists. Wouldn't surprise me one bit, right? It wouldn't even surprise me if when Fury and Klitschko rematch next March, April, if it's for one less title. Wouldn't surprise me at all if one of the sanctioning bodies just finds a way to snatch a title from Fury for no good fucking reason, because that's just what happens. After Lennox Lewis retired, the heavyweight division was in shambles, and there was 4 different titleists, right? Do you guys remember those days? It was awful. Vitali grabbed a title, and he was seen as the top guy, but he only had a title. But then Klitschko, unified everything, and that will happen again. And it looks like Anthony Joshua is gonna be that guy. We have to see. He's got a fight coming up against Dillian-Whyte. I think he's gonna win that fight big and get revenge for the loss to White in the amateurs, but we're gonna see how he develops, but he seems to be that guy. Either way, this win for Fury was good for boxing. It shakes up the heavyweight division. There's all kinds of great possible matchups that could happen, especially if he wins the rematch. But it's a good thing. So Wladimir Klitschko fans, don't be depressed. He looked the way a 40-year-old fighter is supposed to look. Roy Jones during the telecast kept saying, oh, age has nothing to do with this. Age has nothing to do with this. Bullshit. Roy's biased. He's fighting years past his best, right? So he's gonna say that. But it was, my friend Gabe Montoya brought this up in the Next Round podcast he does with Steve Kim. He was just saying, Klitschko looked the way a fighter that age, who's literally been fighting for over 25 years now, that's how they're supposed to look. They're not supposed to look like some of the guys we're seeing in their 40s that look more jacked and ripped and energetic than we've ever seen them, right? So relax, Klitschko fans, his legacy is fine. UK fans, you should be happy. This is awesome. Everyone's talking about the 11 world champions the UK has right now. I need to make a small correction on that to my friends over in the United Kingdom. It's 11 titleists, okay? There's a big difference between a titleist and a champion. But Tyson Fury, he is the champion. He's the heavyweight champion of the world. He's not a titleist. Deontay Wilder's a titleist. Tyson Fury is the heavyweight champion of the world. And for the UK, I mean, you guys gotta be ecstatic about this. It's a very, very fun time for English boxing. Okay, so real quick, I'm actually going on vacation this weekend. I'm gonna be out of town. So there will be no neutral corner for next week, but the following week I'll be back and we'll hit it. So I wanna talk about some quick upcoming fights. There's a lot of stuff, none of it's really, some of it's good, but let's talk about some of this PBC stuff. We got PBC on Showtime this weekend. Chris Algieri making his return from that unanimous decision loss to Amir Khan in May, going up against Eric Bonet, coming off his 5th round knockout loss to Sean Porter in March. Be interesting to see if Algieri looks even better. I thought he looked pretty good against Amir Khan, working with John David Jackson. Let's see if he can look even better against Bonet. Expect Algieri to win big here. Jesus Cuellar fights Jonathan Oquendo. Jesus Cuellar is coming off his 8th round knockout win over Victor Chinian in June. This Jonathan Oquendo guy loses every time he steps up, so I like Cuellar big in this one, obviously. And then in the main event, Danny Jacobs and Peter Quillin doing the Battle of Brooklyn. We've wanted these two to fight forever. they're finally fighting, right? Danny Jacobs, you know, really good amateur career, better amateur career than Quillin in my opinion. He won the Golden Gloves twice, won the PAL championships twice, United States amateur champion, right? But as a professional, the only top level opponent he's faced is Dmitry Pirog. That was back in 2010. We all know how that ended up for him, right? And he's actually the bigger guy as far as his height and length and everything against Peter Quillin. Peter Quillin has had trouble making weight in recent fights, but he's fought the better opposition as a pro. Andy Lee, Hassam Nadam. He started working with Memo Heredia. So expect him to have a lot more snap and pop in his punches. Take from that what you will. I'm just saying he's working with Memo Heredia. I expect him to make weight this time. Because of that, all that stuff should be on point. And I like Quillin in this fight. My heart is with Danny Jacobs. He's a good guy. Battling cancer, coming back from that. Just your heart goes out to the guy. It's impossible not to like Danny Jacobs. I just think Peter Quillin's the better overall professional fighter. So I think he gets the nod. Unfortunately, I don't think Peter Quillin's going to do shit with his title. He's not going to fight Gennady Golovkin, so who gives a shit? Moving on. Next week, next Friday, December 11th, from Puerto Rico, Nonito Donaire fights Cesar Juarez, a Mexican. So you got a Filipino and a Mexican fighting in Puerto Rico. Interesting. But the reason for the card, the thing everyone's excited about is Felix Verdejo is returning from his longest layoff so far in his pro career. I believe it's been about 6 months since he's fought. And he's going up against a Brazilian fighter. Obviously, you can expect a packed house there in the arena. Should be a fun card. Now, the following day, Saturday, the 12th, there's two interesting heavyweight fights. Here in the United States, there's one, and over in London, there's one in the O2 Arena. Talked about it a few minutes ago. Anthony Joshua, Dillian Whyte. I'm really excited for this one. I know you guys over there in the UK are. I expect Tyson Fury to be in the house. You'd think he's going to be there watching ringside, right? Whyte defeated Joshua in the amateurs, but Joshua was very, very young and not as seasoned at that point, right? He kind of looked like a boy in there against Whyte. So I expect him to get big time revenge here and score a knockout against Whyte. And, you know, he's just going to create more and more excitement. I want to see him improve on some things, on his upper body movement, his head movement. He's a little too rigid, a little too stiff for me. Maybe too much weightlifting. Maybe needs to lay off the weights and do more agility type exercises. But other than that, you know, he looks to be the goods. We still don't know until he gets tagged on the chin. But anytime Anthony Joshua fights, we're all going to be watching, right? Now on this side of the pond, there's two American prospects fighting. Dominic Breazeale and Charles Martin, two PBC guys. This is going to be PBC on NBC, and this is going to be prime time, Saturday night on NBC. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of ratings this gets. Dominic Breazeale, these are two heavyweights where they list their heights, and they're not exaggerating. I've met both these guys. I'm 6'4". I've met Dominic Breazeale a bunch of times. They list him at 6'7". He is 6'7". He's a big dude. Charles Martin, they list him at 6'5". He's 6'5". These are two big guys. Breazeale, nice guy, just lacks the boxing skills, gets hit way too much. Charles Martin, better boxing skills, better athlete. He's a southpaw. I like him by late knockout in this. And at that point, he's going to probably become a future opponent for Deontay Wilder. And I think that'd be an interesting fight if Martin continues to develop. He's trained by Henry Tillman here in Los Angeles. Henry Tillman, former Olympic heavyweight gold medalist here for the United States, and was a quality contender who fought Holyfield, Tyson, some of the top guys. So he knows what he's doing in training Martin. And Martin just seems to have a better boxing craft. So I like him to defeat Dominic Breazeale. And on that same card, the actual main event, Omar Figueroa fights Antonio DeMarco. Omar Figueroa coming off his win against Ricky Burns back in May in a pretty exciting fight. And for Antonio DeMarco, he's lost 2 in a row. Tough guy, always gives a tough night, you know, for anybody. But I like Omar Figueroa in this. Figueroa should dominate this fight and not get scratched up or anything too bad, but that's just not how Figueroa fights. Figueroa is kind of limited. He's a brawler. He can't help himself. He's going to get cut up and busted up. Should be a really fun action fight. It's smart by Al Heyman putting this on in San Antonio. Omar Figueroa is from a small town in Texas, maybe 3-4 hours south of San Antonio. So expect a good, lively crowd for this one. But that's it, guys. I'm going to try to rest and get better over the next couple days before I go on vacation to my hometown of Detroit. So any of my subscribers or followers, you know, who live in the Detroit area, hit me up, man. I'll still be checking my social media and stuff, and maybe we'll meet up and grab a beer or something. But in the meantime, you guys enjoy the fights, and I'll see you in a couple weeks.